Tonight, you'll hear some of the wildest theories ever told by Billy Carson. Stories that blend science, spirituality, and the forgotten history of the gods who came from the sky. For years, he's been digging through ancient tablets, decoding myths that most historians ignore, and what he found about the Anunnaki, their origins, their purpose, and their connection to us might change how you see human history forever. So close your eyes and listen carefully, because these aren't just stories from the past. They're fragments of a truth that refuses to stay buried.
Look, we have 46 chromosomes, right?
Right. Chimpanzees have 48.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They discovered that chromosome number 2 was taken out. They call it an artificial mutation. They mean geneticists. Fused together and 2 telomere caps put on, 1 telomere cap on each side. Who in the world took chromosome number 2 out, fused it together, and put telomere caps on it? And they say that it happened as an estimated 200,000 years ago, right at the time that the Sumerian tablets say they decided to make mankind to do the labor. There's no coincidence that the tablets are aligning with modern science. They came here about 450,000 years ago. At the time that they arrived, Alalu, who made it through the hammered bracelet, which is the asteroid belt. At that time, the asteroid belt was still very chaotic because the asteroid belt is an exploded planet that used to have the name of Tiamat. And this means that a couple things. The first thing, it means that we were genetically modified. The second thing that it means is the telomere caps limit our lifespan to about 120 years max, according to Harvard scientists. Now, in the Bible, what does it say? It says that my seed shall not abide in man forever. His years shall be 120. That was taken from the Sumerian tablets, even further back than that, thousands of years before the Bible was written, when Yahweh, a.k.a. Enlil, shows back up, sees the human beings building a tower into the heavens, copying a tower that they themselves had built. It pissed them off, and he said, whatever their hearts decide to do, they shall achieve it. My seed shall not abide in man, his years shall be 120. And then he did a genetic modification at that point, I believe, with the telomeres, and he spread mankind out around the planet, and he confused their languages. He had us speaking different languages, so we couldn't collaborate. Now we're in competition, no collaboration, divide and conquer.
And there's the Tower of Babel.
That's it. That's it, man.
So it was all done just to keep us from rising.
Yes. We were advancing too fast, and he had to slow us down. If we shorten their lifespan, then they won't have enough time. By the time they realize who they are and what power they have, they'll be dead. And see, that's what's happened to us.
So the craziest version of this story is that they genetically engineered us out of lower primates and put us here to mine gold.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then established different types of civilizations and taught us how to build things, taught us all these different things. And enough time has passed that we've kind of forgotten. Mm-hmm. Enough time has passed. That's the wackiest version of it, right?
Right. That's the bare bones minimum.
Yeah, the wackiest version is that they made us, mm-hmm. which is, we've talked about this a couple of times, but how bizarre it is that human beings have this incredible fascination for gold. Mm-hmm. We're fascinated with gold. Yeah. This fascination with gold is really weird. Mm-hmm. Like, why back when it was basically useless? You couldn't make a knife out of it. Right. You couldn't, like, it didn't make sense that this would be so valuable. Just because it's rare, you're barely alive. Right. We're going, right? We're going back to full-on hunter and gatherer, our ancestors with spears and stone chipped. And then after that, gold emerges. Mm-hmm. And it stays. Yeah. It stays forever. Yeah. Now, when you read Zecharia Sitchin's book, he talks about this in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. His description of it was that they needed to suspend gold particles in the atmosphere because their atmosphere was being destroyed.
Right.
Then you move to like somewhere around the 2000s when climate scientists start proposing this idea of suspending reflective particles in the atmosphere.
Right.
And then when you realize the unique properties of gold, how unusual it is in terms of like a building material, you can coat things. The reason why things are like coated in gold, silver plated, or gold plated rather, you can take a tiny piece of gold and cover an enormous area with it. It's a strange metal.
Yeah.
Like really weird. And what, the supposed story is, it's very common on Earth, very rare on Nibiru.
Right. Yeah, that's the story. And now when I started looking into this gold thing myself, and here's what I came up with. So when you start analyzing the text, you discover that there was an encampment in a place called South Africa at Adam's Calendar. Okay. Now, at Adam's Calendar, there's actually the very first gold mines discovered. They're dating them back to about 200,000 years ago. And that's incredible because there's a building there that looks like a worn down structure. Now, in the tablets, it talks about the fact that the Ijiji, who were the working class Anunnaki beings who were cleaning out the Euphrates and Tigris River so they can create irrigation and, create a bustling civilization. Also, they were doing the actual construction themselves. No people needed, just them working. They were like the construction workers, and Anu and Enki and Enlil, these leader gods, were like, the foremen, the master architects and so forth, right? The boss. So these people were working, but they weren't supposed to be enslaved. They were volunteers. They got tired of doing the work, according to them, for about 250,000 years of labor on Earth, and also, according to them, on Mars. This is in the text. They call it Lamu. And so they decided to go to war against Enki, Enlil, and Anu because their demands had not been met. So they went to meet them in the Epic of Atrahasis. They go to Adam's calendar. They go to that same structure that was discovered where that gold mine is located. I was like, holy crap, there is some link here to gold. Specifically, exactly, I don't know. But I know if you're an advanced civilization, you need gold. And the people that you have working it for, you probably think, it's to adorn or to adorn yourself or in recognition of the gods. So they'll wear it and they'll utilize it, but not for technology. But what's crazy is they go to war, they go to get ready to go to battle. And then Enki says, I have an idea that will stop this war. There's an existing being on this planet. Existing, not something that doesn't exist, existing. We can add our essence to it with a slain god. So they're talking about taking the DNA or genetics from one of themselves and mixing it with the DNA of the hominid that was here. It's not specified whether it was, an ape man or anything, but they don't specify in the tablets. But to create a worker being. And they began to do this genetic modification, probably disconnecting some of our DNA, making genetic modifications to us to get us to take orders from them. They inserted something called a worship gene, which was just discovered recently, that human beings have a gene inside of them that can be turned on and turned off. It can be turned off in a laboratory setting. It can also be turned off with a magnetic field around your head. And when it's off, you don't want to worship anything outside of yourself. You look inside. And when it's on, you look to get something from the outside. So this is incredible. And so they made us worship people.
Gene
yes.
inside of us to make us worship them. Wow, how genius.
It's incredible because then you're not a slave anymore. You're doing this for the honor of the gods.
And for people who think all this talk is really crazy, I want to put into perspective that we talked about this the other day, that during which war was it where the Soviet Union was experimenting? It was scientists in the Soviet Union, correct? They're experimenting with creating a chimpanzee human being hybrid that they would probably send to war.
Yeah.
So instead of having regular people, we would make this monster, this freak, ape man, and send him to war and have him crush the enemies.
Yeah.
So how crazy is that? They knew how strong chimps are. I got an idea. Let's turn a chimp human, and that way, if he dies, who gives a fuck?
Right.
We made him. Get him to go to work for us.
Yeah.
And now if you're a supremely enlightened being, wouldn't you think of human beings with all of our folly and all of our chaos and all of our war and bullshit and the internet and disinformation and misinformation, wouldn't you think of us kind of the same way we would think about that chimp hybrid thing?
Yeah.
If I was I was the president of Russia, I want my cousins to go to war?
No.
Or I want to send this freak that I made in a lab?
Yeah, and what's interesting, I'm glad you said made in a lab. They had talked briefly in that text about fashioning people. In other words, almost
How did
like...
they say it?
They said the word fashioning. Fashioning a being.
What was do you remember the actual quote?
I would have to look it up, the actual quote.
But they describe it as fashion.
Fashioning, because they said even the lamb hadn't been fashioned yet, so they had fashioned lambs. So they fashioned, and it's also in the Epic of Gilgamesh, they fashioned the friend that Gilgamesh went on the journey with. He wasn't born from a woman's womb. They created him. They created him an artificial being to go on this journey in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So they used that phrase several times in the tablets. But they said, no, wait. So it was almost like that's not a good idea because in some ways it seems as if they had known that the idea of making these too many artificially created people wouldn't be a good idea. Now, they didn't go deeper than that, but you can see where we are today with AI and everything else and these robots that are coming. Maybe they knew something about that, but they decided to take a biological being and genetically modify and program that to do the work, and that's exactly what they did.
Well, if they really knew what we would be capable of and that we would be illogical, overpopulation would be a gigantic issue. And in many parts, I mean, it's not really that big of an issue here, except for in cities. But in many parts of the world, it's the whole country.
Yeah.
The whole country is New York City, which
Right.
is just fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
You know, and you got to one. It's actually not true. It's like it's not even that bad. Even in China, China has a lot of open space. But when you're in those cities, they are massive, and they are filled with people.
Yeah.
And that is probably what you'd imagine a higher being would do if it was like us, like kind of illogical and kind of a little bit reckless and has a little bit too much technology for the average person that didn't develop the technology. But all of a sudden you got some 85 IQ dope who has access to all the things that all these geniuses have created.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could figure. We talked to Michio Kaku. He built a nuclear reactor in his house,
Right.
when he was a kid.
I heard about that. That was crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
That's so crazy. But there's a lot of different stuff that you can do and have access to technology that is beyond anything you would ever be able to invent with your own mind. But because we share things across the board, you would imagine that if you were an enlightened being from another planet that's a million years more advanced than us, you'd go, I see where this one's going. You know, like you have that cousin who's an alcoholic and then he wins the lottery. Like, oh shit, Derek just won the lottery.
Yeah.
Fuck. This is gonna be crazy.
Yeah.
Derek's got $200 million. It's
Right.
gonna be fucking insane.
It's crazy. And they knew they were going outside their own guidelines and their own laws, their parameters, because they made a statement in the text. They said the creator of all is going to punish them, or they would have to answer to the creator of all for what they did here. So, and that lets you know they weren't really gods. They knew themselves that they weren't the creator of the universe, but that they masqueraded as gods on this planet.
Just like we did when different versions of human civilization would find primitive tribes, like the cargo tribe,
cults.
the cargo cult that you talked about in your documentary. That is so fascinating that during World War II, planes landed on these remote places, and these people built mock planes to show like what the thing was that came to visit them that they thought were like gods.
Wild.
Do you think that if the Anunnaki are real and if Nibiru really exists and there's another planet with highly intelligent beings that are far more advanced than us, if that's the case, do you think there's more advanced and more just like we are to chimpanzees, they are to us, and then another race is to them, and then it just keeps going on and on forever until you're God?
Absolutely. I believe there's levels to the game, just like there's levels in terms of how we live on this planet.
Yeah.
We have a first world, second world, third world, just here on Earth. Now magnify that as a fractal, as a universe as a whole. You have civilizations that are 1 million, 2 million, maybe even 1 billion years ahead, and every universe every civilization progressing within the universe at a specific rate. So you can have beings that have already maybe even shed their corporeal bodies and only exist as beings of energetic light, and then you have everything all the way back down towards us. Before Earth even existed, you had Mercury, Venus, which was in the position we're in now, and then you had Tiamat. Earth wasn't here yet. Tiamat had 2 moons. It probably had more than that, but the 2 we know of is the moon we have now and Mars. Mars can be backtracked. Even modern mainstream astrophysicists agree that Mars was probably a moonlet that orbited a much larger planet based on the weird elliptical orbit that it has.
Really?
Yeah. So what happened was you have our moon and you have Mars, the habitable moon, orbiting Tiamat. Tiamat in the Enuma Elish, the 7 types of creation, literally gets impacted by another object that was orbiting another star. So our solar system had gravitationally attracted a rogue solar system, so to speak, and there was a collision that happened which made Tiamat explode. When Tiamat exploded, now here's something interesting before I go that far. In the text, it says that Tiamat's glory rivaled the sun. It was a water-bearing planet with land and life. Now, who wrote that? How did they know that this planet had land and life and that it rivaled the sun's glory? That when the sun shined on it, it beamed back because it had so much water and it was so massive. It was 6 times larger than Earth. Somebody had a view of this planet from somewhere in the solar system. But anyway, so it exploded. A huge chunk swung away with all that land and organic material and recoalesced as the Earth. The moon then was put into place to balance the wobble.
Right.
Mars grabbed its own crazy elliptical orbit around the sun. That's why we can only rendezvous with Mars when I think it's in perigee every 2 years.
Right.
Because of its weird distances that it that it has with orientation to Earth.
Right.
And so Earth has weird anomalies inside of it that go back hundreds of millions of years. People are like, how did this hammer, this 200 million year old hammer, because they can tell by the depth in these mines, how did this pottery get down here, 300 million year old piece of pottery? It's not from Earth. It's when Earth was part of Tiamat. You're looking at a relic from a whole other civilization when we were part of another planet. Nobody's talking about this. That's the next thing that I'm going to be talking about in my next book. We're talking about Earth.
They found artifacts that...
Oh, yeah. We've got artifacts that date back 300, 400, 500 million years.
Like which artifacts specifically?
There's vases, there's hammers, or things that look like hammers, or tools that have been discovered deep in these mine shafts. And you can tell the years by the depth of the mine.
In your book, you mentioned that some of these Ajiji were working for like 3,600 years to terraform the Earth or something like that. So, so getting back to, we kind of got a little bit off track, but you were talking about the origin of the Anunnaki was 4,500 years ago.
450,000.
I'm sorry. Yeah. 450,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And they came from somewhere else, right? That's the meaning. Anunnaki means not from Earth, right?
Right.
So they came after there was a bigger planet that was 6 times the size of Earth. It somehow smashed into something and created the Earth.
Right.
So after that, why did they come here, and how did the tablets say exactly why they came here?
If you notice in our book, The Epic of Humanity, there's the most tablets ever referenced in any one book in history, first of all. This book has more references to more tablets and excerpts from those tablets. And the reason why, we're painting a picture that all these places from around the world and all these tablets and scriptures and papyruses and cylinder scrolls are all connected to one race of people that came from the Pleiadian star system. And they hail from the Pleiades. In my new TV series called Anunnaki Ancient Secrets Revealed, which is coming out very soon in Regal Cinemas, and then it'll be on Forbidden TV, you'll find out that there was a galactic war in that sector of the galaxy. And this war was so crazy, they were using something called a Brahmahanda weapon, which can destroy any man on 3 worlds. We're talking about a real Death Star that existed in ancient times. This weapon, once it was released, you couldn't withdraw it. You couldn't bring it back. There was no way to cancel it. And you can operate it from something called a Tablet of Destiny. And whoever had their hands on these tablets of destiny had control of the galaxy, and they were stolen a couple of times. So power had been jumping back and forth. Imagine if we're here on this Earth and somebody blows up Saturn. We want to get off Earth because big chunks are coming our way. So there were something called space refugees. My personal opinion. This is not in any text. This is my opinion now. These people fled. This is how we got the Orion, Aldebaran, Zeta Reticulus, the Dog Star. All these other places began to get inhabited. Earth was another targeted location as a breakaway civilization. Some of these beings, according to the Enuma Elish, landed on a planet orbiting a brown dwarf called Nibiru. And some people say, oh, Nibiru was never in any ancient text. Yeah, look at the oldest version of the Enuma Elish. It says Nibiru and it says Anunnaki. The oldest version. Much later, in a newer version, which a few thousand years later, another copy was made by Amun-Ra. He changed Nibiru's name to Marduk because he wanted to be the destroyer. But anyway, that's another story. But the point is, these people decided, look, we're looking for breakaway civilizations. Us on Earth right now, human beings, if we just think that we're going to stay here on this planet forever, we're fooling ourselves. We need to also look for breakaway civilization. We got to create a breakaway civilization for ourselves. Our sun is already middle age. It's going to die in 5 billion years, which seems like a long time, but that's a blink of an eye on geological timescales. Right. Earth is going to get swallowed up as it turns into a red giant because we don't have a massive sun that can create our sun will expand into a red giant. We don't have enough mass for it to turn into a supernova. So it'll expand into a red giant, then it'll shrink down and collapse into a white dwarf. But it's going to incinerate Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Gone. Incinerated, right? Right. So we need to start thinking if we want the humanity to progress. Not only that, we've only been here on this planet, as a human being and Homo sapiens for 200,000 years at this level. A blink of an eye, less than a blink of an eye. In any geological time, at any time, any geological disaster can happen here, and that could collapse our entire civilization. Even if just one solar flare can turn us off and we'll be done. So we have to find a way to get off planet, which is why this is a big push for Mars. It's about creating a breakaway civilization, learning how to do it right, making mistakes along the way and learning from those, and then branching out even further into space. That's the plan. And so these beings came here because they're like, look, we got to find a breakaway civilization. They were scanning Earth, and they discovered from the scattered light that, like the same way we scan for elements, they discovered there was gold and other resources on the planet coming just from looking at the light of the planet. Same way we do now in astrophysics. So they said, this is a great place. So one guy risked his life to get through the hammered bracelet and made it through. Then he radioed back to Nibiru and said, hey, I found everything we need right here. And then they started sending people down a little bit at a time, and they started building. And when they got here, Enlil, on a crystal tablet he showed to his sister, it says, Ninma, he showed her the building construction technique that's going to be on this planet, he said, for all time. He already had it laid out, how he was going to build the cities, how he was going to build the plumbing, everything, the way the city grid was going to be laid out. It was all on this crystal tablet. Now, what kind of tablet is a crystal tablet?
Right.
Sounds like an iPad or something.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Who sits around writing sci-fi stories 6,000 years ago? So somebody wrote this because they were told to, and I believe that what they wrote was exactly what possibly happened. I think we're getting as close to the truth as we can possibly get. Now, when they began doing all this building and all this work, we were already here. We meaning our cousins, human beings' cousins, not Homo sapien sapien, but the prior version of us was already here. Now, this prior version of us, in my opinion, was probably more advanced spiritually. I think that we had bigger bones, bigger skulls, bigger brains. I think our skulls have been found all over. I think they've been misunderstood in some cases, maybe even for aliens in some cases. But that they had probably bigger pineal glands, probably could communicate silently, not technologically more advanced, but just more in tune with nature. A lot of abilities that we should have, like understanding how to feel the magnetic field and sense the magnetic field and navigate through that magnetic field, like animals, we've lost that ability. But we know in a laboratory setting, we still have it because the crystals in our brain orient to the magnet.
Yeah.
So we still have it. We're not in touch with it anymore. But what happened was
That's funny. I have a friend who moved to the Amazon, and he said as soon as he moved to the Amazon and got disconnected from civilization and from technology, he said all these crazy instincts just came back into him.
Yes, I believe that because he needed time to be away from all of that,
right,
and just let your body recoalesce into what it truly is. This is the most powerful, machine that probably exists in this sector of the universe, and so. What they said was, okay, well, these people are here, but we're not going to mess with them. We're just going to continue to build what we're doing. And the Ijiji built and worked for about 200,000 years.
And we were already here?
We were already here in small pockets around the planet.
Okay.
And just indigenous peoples, just living our lives as, cave people and things like that. Nothing advanced. And then they probably saw us just as animals, you know. And then the Gigi got pissed off, as you know, in the Antra Hasis and also in the Enuma Elish. Two different stories, two different time periods, same story.
Now, okay, so can you explain exactly what the Ijiji were supposed to be? Were they part of the Anunnaki? Did they come here with the Anunnaki?
They came with the Anunnaki. Okay. They were the workers. They were, in other words, if I'm going to go out and buy a huge plot of land and say I'm going to build a city here, I'll probably call somebody like Chris Dunn and say, hey, man, I need an engineer, right? This guy, but engineer is going to say, well, I need brick masons and stone masons, and the stone masons, I need electricians. So these were the people that knew how to do the grunt work. They knew how to build the structures based on the instructions or the blueprints. Right. So these are the people. They were builders, and they were Anunnaki. Now, Anunnaki doesn't mean they're all one particular race of people. It means they were people who came from heaven to earth. Anybody from space that comes to earth is an Anunnaki. The civilization they built is the Atlantean. But even in the tablets, it talks about some of these people coming from different planets or stars, which means that they probably most likely were a mixed race of people. And I have evidence to prove this, and I'll tell you in a minute. So they got pissed off. They decided, look, we're working too hard. You guys are treating us almost like slaves now. We want to get a break. We want some relief from this work. And even that, not only that, we want women. They were pissed off that they didn't have any women.
Really?
So this is where the sons of God fell from heaven. They came from Mars down to earth in Genesis, and they took women with them back. But in the Sumerian tablet, you get the full story where they go to Adam's calendar in South Africa. They encircle the camp of the god, which is Anu, the head of the Anunnaki at that time. And they get ready to do war, and Enki and Lil and Anu come outside. They get their guards out there. Everything is tense. And they say, look, man, we're tired of doing this labor. And, we need a break. That's Adam's calendar there in Africa, where one of the oldest gold mines was discovered, and it dates back to 200,000 years. Isn't that interesting?
Really?
Yes. Pretty crazy stuff. But what's interesting is that these people, you know, these Anunnaki people, they said, okay, well, we're going to go to war then, because there's nothing we can do. You guys got to keep working. And then Enki says, wait a minute. I have an idea. There's an existing being on this planet, existing. We can add our essence to it. So this is where they took one of the Igigi, took some blood from an Igigi, and it's not really quite clear how they did it or what they did, but in some way, it seems as if they combined that with the genetics of one of these hominids, our cousins, and they made a clone, mixed Igigi, mixed hominid, somebody they can control. In other words, they can communicate with, they can teach to a certain level, they can get them to do the workload, they can instruct them and they would listen. And so they were doing this genetic modifying, and they
it sounded like they
created
sacrificed one of the gods.
Right. They call it a sacrifice. I don't know if they really would have killed it outright. It could be a term that's used to specify draining the blood out.
Right. Okay.
I would be surprised if they really actually killed, because when you get to that level of technology and advancement, the fact that you would kill somebody to make somebody else live, it seems a little weird. It seems more like a huge blood transfusion or some type of an organ donate. It was something. I don't know if the person really died, because it never really says if they died or not. The word sacrifice could be a word used when you don't know what word could exist in that spot.
Right.
You know, it's potential. Now, that's potential. It could be a sacrifice for real. I'm not sure. But my hypothesis leads me to believe probably a little different, because they're just too advanced. So they made this clone version of hominid / Igigi, got it to work, but so they started making more in these Hathor birthing houses, which the Hathor birthing houses, like at the Temple of Dendera, the Temple of Isis, and all these other places, are there. They're still there. The structures are still there. I take people to see them every year. Now, what's interesting is these people, they couldn't produce babies on their own. If you take a lion and a tiger and you mate them, you're gonna have a ligon, right? But the ligon can't make any babies. No matter how much time you try to mate it, it won't be able to have any babies. It can't. If it's a male, it won't be able to get anybody pregnant, and if it's a female, it won't be able to get pregnant.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
It's genetics. The genetics work to a certain point, and then they fall apart. Just like if you take a horse and a donkey, you get a mule, but mules can't reproduce.
For real?
Yeah.
Did you know this, Steve?
No, I didn't know that at all. I thought if you can make a thing, then it can make other things.
I thought that's how like breeding shit, like that's how they made the golden retriever, by like breeding different dogs together. And
certain combination of chromosomes don't reproduce. So you have the horse and a donkey will make you a mule.
Okay.
But a mule can't make another mule. It's pretty interesting stuff. You know, and so same thing, I think, with these clones. And so they started getting frustrated because they weren't making enough clones to get the amount of workload done. They wanted them to reproduce on their own. And so that's when Isis says, you know, I have an idea. I'm going to take the baby to term. I'm going to give birth to the Adamu. So she takes an egg out of one of the existing hominids. She does something with the DNA and the genetics inside the egg, what we call today making a zygote. She puts it in her room. That's artificial insemination. And then she takes it to term 10 months. And there's a cylinder scroll with her holding up the baby saying, my hands have made it, the Adamu. That means first man. So now we have the first genetically modified, perfected version of Homo sapiens sapien. They tried to mate him with these other clones. Didn't work again. They said, damn it. So they then took some DNA from him, made another, a female, and then mated them together, and it worked. I said, we got it. So then they started making Adams and Eves in these birthing houses. Adams and Eve. Adam and Eve weren't the only two people on Earth. They were, when they got here, there were already probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people already here. Okay. And then what happens is, if you take two people and you think you're going to get 8 billion out of two, it doesn't work. What happens if you start having with your sister?
Right. And
then she gives birth, and then those babies have to each other. You're going to have genetic mutations, and by the third generation, they won't even be able to, they'll be dead, they'll be stillbirths.
Right.
Not enough genetic diversity. So they created Eden, Edin, and Enki, he was known as Satan, the Lord of Eden in the text. And he would watch over this Eden. He had guards with weapons to guard why would you have to guard this place with weapons? and he had people in there, and he was having mating times. They have specific times that they can mate and couldn't mate. And it was like breeding people. And they were working on perfecting it. And when Enki came and told Adam and Eve who they were and how powerful they were and that they were at the same level as them, that's when they realized that they weren't dumb. That was the apple. The apple was knowledge. And then Enlil comes back and gets pissed off because he discovered what happens. And then he starts calling his brother the devil. You don't listen to him, he's evil. But that was to distract the people, to keep him in charge of the people. In the myth of Adapa, if you read that ancient tablet, the myth of Adapa, which is Adam, you discover that he's been told that the way that we were genetically modified by Enki, he added a little extra into us, that even us, we human beings, Homo sapiens sapien, have the capability of superseding and excelling far beyond the Anunnaki when we reach our full potential. And it was programmed into us. He said also, the knowledge and wisdom is already programmed into our body, into the DNA, that at a future time we'd be able to tap into it. That's in the myth of Adapa.
Whoa.
Yeah, powerful stuff. And when Adam discovered all of this, he tried to commit suicide. He was kicked out of the garden, as you know. He tried to drown himself in the waters, and the guards came and pulled him out of the water, wouldn't let him kill himself. And then, as you know, they had Cain and Abel, and Cain killed Abel. And then Cain tells God, well, God is Enlil, Yahweh. Who's he talking to? He's talking to Enlil, who's known as Yahweh in the Bible. He says, you're going to get out of here, and for what you did. And Cain says, well, the people out there are going to kill me. That's what it says in the Bible. Well, what people? There shouldn't be anybody out there.
Right.
Oh, there's people out there. He goes, don't worry, I'm going to put a mark on you. And that way they'll know your minds and they'll never touch you. And you'll find your wife when you get out there, which is exactly what happened. And he started the Canaanites. So people were here already. Adam and Eve were not the first two people on earth. Two people didn't produce 8 billion people. That's a farce. Even in mainstream, science, when they talk about this one, this one hominid that they discovered in Africa, everybody came out of this one lady. Come on. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. Genetics doesn't work that way. We all know that. Chromosomes don't work that way. We all know that. And what's interesting is you have a civilization being built that started off by genetic mutating an existing hominid species on Earth to create a worker race. A worker race that was enslaved but didn't believe they were enslaved. They did two things. They installed a worship gene in the human genome, and scientists have now found this worship gene. When this gene is turned off, the person has no need or want to worship outside of itself, or him or herself. When it's turned back on, the person has a feel of a need to worship something on the outside. When it's off, we go inside. So this worship gene was put in. They were masquerading as gods. They needed to put that in there to keep us loyal to them. So we would do the work thinking they would be giving praises to the gods. And then the second thing is, as you look at the Emerald Tablets where it's talked about everybody was spread out around the planet, and people were told to go around the planet and rule over different areas, I believe that the reason what makes you a Caucasian, makes me a black person, what makes an Asian person yellow, what makes an indigenous American person red, is a genetic marker. That's the marker. In genetics, I started digging into this. I said, why is this color difference? In other words, I shouldn't be this skin tone because my ancestors were digging in the, working in the fields of Africa or walking in the sands of the desert. It's ridiculous.
That's the theory, right?
That's the theory.
It's because being out in the sun all day produces more melanin to protect you from
foolishness.
Right.
What I discovered, real science in real books in colleges. You go look it up. It says that there's a 2% variance in genes between races of people. And we're all the human race, but there's a 2% difference. Now that 2% difference is so big on the genetic scale that it would take multi-millions of years to happen naturally through natural evolution. But it happened in 200,000 years. So what the scientists are saying is it happened artificially. They say they don't know how it happened artificially, but this is an artificial mutation. But when you look at the Sumerian tablets and you discover the Tower of Babel incident, it really explains what happened. When Enlil, who's known as Yahweh, comes back and sees humans building a tower into the heavens in one of these cities, duplicating what the Anunnaki had built, he gets pissed off because he realizes, oh man, Enki got me. These people are too smart. And he says, I got to destroy this. So he destroys the tower. In the Bible, he destroys the tower in the Sumerian tablets. And he says, my seed shall not abide in man forever. His years shall be 120. That's the first thing he did. He cut our years down to 120 years. And what's the maximum lifespan of a human being in the most pristine condition, according to Harvard University professors? 120 years. Then the next thing he did was he separated humans and put them in different places around the planet, just like the tablets say. And then he confused the languages so that we couldn't communicate and collaborate anymore, which is why there's all these different crazy languages. And then on top of that, he put a brand. There's a brand. Whoever ruled over an area, brand your people. We know that those are your people. Brand your people. We know those are your people. So there's this separation, this divide and conquer tactic that's a super ancient divide and conquer tactic that happened long, long time ago to separate and divide humanity into these sects and these different compartments.
So for what reason, though?
To keep us from collaborating, to keep us from living longer, number one, keep us from collaborating with each other. And look how it's worked. Look how these invisible lines we have on this planet till this very day are still here. Yeah. If I go to Mexico, I'm an alien. If they come to America, they're an alien.
Yeah, we're still blowing each other up, blowing each other up because of fucking religious ideologies.
It's crazy. So I walk across this invisible line, I'm going to be killed. I'm going to be shot. Yeah. Look what's going on in Israel and Palestine. So it's the same. They did it. What they did, it's still working till this very day. That's how powerful it was. And we have fallen victim and prey to genetic modification and dogma that has really held mankind back from achieving its maximum potential in a much shorter period of time. We're still going in that direction, but we could have been so much further along if it wasn't for the dogma and the genetic modification.
Chris Dunn's new book called The Tesla Connection about the Giza power plant, he basically updated his whole theory on the pyramids.
It just got delivered because I had it on pre-order, and then when I was out of the country all this time, it came to my house. I finally opened up all that piles of mail and saw his book there.
Yeah. So he reworked his whole original theory on the Giza power plant. Nice. And he made, now in a nutshell, his theory is that it was a solid state electron harvester that harvested vibrations deep within igneous rock, deep within the earth, like with earthquakes. Like with near fault lines, there's this phenomena where people will see like balls of like plasma light come up into the atmosphere. And he had a NASA scientist talk about this. This guy actually did a TED talk where he talked all about how these lights that would come up through fault lines, they would come up days or weeks before earthquakes, and they were indicators of how to avoid destruction and death with earthquakes. Like if you start to see these balls of light coming up at night near fault lines, to get the hell out because there's going to be an earthquake. And they did studies and they found out, in fact, there were earthquakes following these balls of light that were coming up into the atmosphere. And it connects with his whole theory that these pyramids, I think it's 14 square acres that the Great Pyramid covers. There was that subterranean chamber under the. I mean, you've been there many times. I've never been there.
I've been in the subterranean chamber.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They opened it for me. It went down. Yeah.
So his theory is that there was a hydraulic hammer or something in there that would go off and create seismic vibrations within the earth, and that would somehow resonate up through the grand gallery into the king's chamber. And then there was also around the pyramids, apparently there's these cavities in the ground where they would pour some sort of chemical, and the shafts that go out of the pyramid, those would fill up with liquid hydrogen, and they were sort of like microwave emitters.
I believe that. I talk about that in a lot of my lectures over the last maybe 8 years.
Really?
Yes. I talk about the fact that those shafts were there because the way the Queen's Chamber is set up, you can see that it's set up for, at least my perception of it is that it's set up to extract hydrogen from the water that would run up in there from the aquifer that used to be underneath the pyramid. And the shafts, they're pointed and aligned perfectly with star systems. What do we use right now in astrophysics to try to communicate with ET? We use the frequency of hydrogen to send our messages.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. So I believe that we were sending messages to Aldebaran, to Orion, and all these other Sirius that we're aligned with on those particular alignments with the Great Pyramid. We know these alignments are real because it's even in mainstream science, to send communications. This is a report on Earth. This is where we are right now. This is what's going on. This is how developed we've done, blah, 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 blah. Kind of a report as to what's going on, and communication back home to these different star systems. And so that's what I believe those shafts were for that. Plus also the fact that the pyramid itself was generating power. I think the Great Pyramid is a multifunctional stone computer and power generator. It had multi-functions, not just one or two, but probably 10 or 15 functions.
Yeah, and he apparently there was like a big explosion that happened, like a hydrogen explosion that happened within the king's chamber that sort of like blew it all apart.
Yeah.
When there, apparently that was like during the Younger Dryas, one of those cosmic impacts came through. There was too much energy.
There's a picture of me standing right next to the granite box on the inside, and the corner, I'm pointing to it because it's broken off. I'll send you this photo.
Right.
You can look across the room though, and you can see where it hit the granite wall and made the exact same indentation from the corner piece and destroyed the granite wall in the corner. So it flew about 20 feet across the room and smashed and broke solid granite in the same exact corner piece angle. I was told by one of the guides a couple years ago that, get as much as you can coming in here because they say that they may one day shut off access to the king's chamber. I said, why would they do that? You said, well, they're afraid that, the pyramid's earthquake or something could make it unstable. I'm like, this thing has been here for thousands of years. It's not going to become unstable. That's foolishness. What's happening is they've discovered something technological about it, and they want to control it. So
NASA owns the rights to the interior of the Great Pyramid.
Yes.
That's spooky, man.
They also own the rights to a section of the Grand Canyon. So I took a helicopter down into the Grand Canyon. They said we can't walk to this area. That area I heard had some old carvings or something would be over in this area. So I started trying to walk that way. And this guy pops out of nowhere with all black on, black hat, black military outfit with no logos, and an AR-15 and tells me, halt, you can't go any further. I'm like, well, why? I said, what's going on? Oh, didn't they tell you couldn't come over here? I said, well, they did, but I'm thinking, I just want to see, what's over here.
Right.
And he says, you can't come. I said, well, why? What? I said, can you just tell me, sir, like, why can't I come over here? He says, NASA owns the rights to this section. You can't come over here.
At the Grand Canyon.
At the Grand Canyon.
Do you have any theories of why that is?
This got to be technological. Starts in something with space. And then also, where else? Chaco Canyon. Same situation. They actually own the rights to those round former things that look like they might have been domes or whatever. And now there's no dome, but you can see those round circles.
Where are those at?
Chaco Canyon. That's in South America. And so it's like, so wait a minute, what's going on here? How in the world what are they doing? As soon as India sent that satellite to Mars and took a color image of Mars, the real color with the oceans and the water and everything of Mars, the director of NASA flew straight to India. And the next thing you know, about a month later, they're signing a deal. There's a whole press release about it. And they now put them under their umbrella. And the next thing you know, that image, they put something called false color on it, turned the whole thing red.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Now, the newest image of Mars just got released. I have an image that I took with my Celestron telescope, and a new one just came out. This new image of Mars.
How long ago?
Just the other day.
Really?
They finally let somebody see what Mars really looks like. That's it right there. So, and I'm going to send you the one I took years ago with my Celestron 130 telescope.
Earth.com. Steve, if you can find out, it's called Planet Mars Captured in True Color for the first time ever. It's on Earth.com. Wow.
Yeah.
What is all the blue supposed to be?
Water.
Really?
Guess what they just said about Mars recently? They said that the soil on Mars is better for growing crops than the soil on Earth.
Yeah, look at this, man.
How do they know that?
And while digging through old interviews, I came across a clip that felt different. Billy Carson wasn't just talking about the Anunnaki. He was describing a global pattern of portal doorways, ancient structures that seem to mirror the same hidden technology across the world.
They have these suits on that have these carvings of technology all over their bodies, and they're holding a weapon in one hand, and the other hand they're holding an Anunnaki handbag. But there's also this concrete doorway. It looks like a doorway, but then it ends. They have these all around the world, and it has a little notch in it. And these are these Stargate doorways that you walk into with the right frequency, and you put this thing on that notch, and you walk through the wall, and you walk into another world or wherever it goes to the other end. how to open a Stargate portal, they were talking about this stone called a K2 megalith. So the K2 megalith is a massive crystal about this big, and it's underneath one of the tunnels in Bosnia leading up to the Pyramid of the Sun. Now, the Pyramid of the Sun is a gigantic pyramid in Bosnia. This is in Europe. This pyramid is larger than the Great Pyramid at Giza. Now, this pyramid was purposefully covered with trees and roots and grass and everything else to hide it from the world. And the capstone is still on it, though. The thing about it is it's still kind of an active, portal. So that's what they were saying. Like, this would be the perfect place to make a test because it's private property, it's independently owned, and the majority of the pyramid is still functional. Now, this K2 megalith crystal that was in there, it had writing on it. I don't know if you heard that part. The writing said, "We must stand in defense." Okay, we must stand and fight, basically, they're saying, until we can open this portal. So there was a war going on. That dates back to the Pyramid War, the last Pyramid War that decimated Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, that decimated the entire Giza Plateau and turned it into a desert. That war was the last war that Amun-Ra, aka Marduk, was involved in, and so there must have been some fight back going on, and they were trying to get into this portal to escape. And somebody carved into that crystal, I guess, while they were waiting there and defending, whoever was guarding the area, that this is what's going on. We might not make it. Like, we're fighting right now. We're in a major battle, and we can't get this portal open. For whatever reason, they couldn't get it open. So that's more evidence than ever to me that there's Stargate portals that really, truly do exist. And they had the capability to get, maybe they couldn't get into them because maybe they didn't have their jet pillar ankhs on them. That's the key to getting in. Yeah, when I went to, where was I? I was in part of Mexico. I went to Teotihuacan, but I went somewhere else. I went to Tula, Mexico. And in Tula, Mexico, there is a pyramid of Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan there. It's one of his own. It's actually named after him. It was one that he orchestrated to have built. It's not that massive, but it's pretty decent size. And in the back of the pyramid, there's a ball court, like you see the Mayan ball court and all that. But there's also this concrete doorway. It looks like a doorway, but then it ends. They have these all around the world, and it has a little notch in it. And these are these Stargate doorways that you walk into with the right frequency, and you put this thing on that notch, and you walk through the wall, and you walk into another world or wherever it goes to the other end. They say that when he used to come there, he used to battle with people that were coming to take over the area and things like that. He would defeat these enemies, and then he would go back into this door. So there's a picture of me standing in the door, like I'm getting ready to vanish or whatever. I stood in the door, the same door where he would go, Thoth himself would stand into, go into another portal, or go into another dimension, or go into another planet, wherever it led to. So he would disappear and reappear from that doorway. Amazing stuff. And at the top of this pyramid are these gigantic Toltecs. They have these suits on that have these carvings of technology all over their bodies, and they're holding a weapon in one hand, and the other hand they're holding an Anunnaki handbag. Okay, just amazing stuff. So I don't know if you know about that. Anybody here know about the Anunnaki handbag? Yeah, amazing. So these Anunnaki, these Sumerians, they have these, every single one, no matter where you look around the world, everywhere, on every continent, you always see them holding this bag. Okay, and I did a documentary on this bag a couple years ago. The bag, I was watching an Apollo 11 documentary, and it was actually the Mercury mission before Apollo launched. They would go do all these test flights, and the astronauts came out, they got in a little bus, they had a life support bag in their hand, and their spacesuits on. I was like, that's interesting. Then they got into this little bus and they went to the rocket tower, launch tower. They got out of the launch tower, and then they went up the elevator and they got inside the capsule with the life support bag, and they were laying down in the same exact position as Lord Pakal, which is that famous stone that has this really Thoth etched into this stone found in Mexico, where he's inside of this capsule that launching into space. And he's got the bag, he's got his hands and feet on pedals and everything else. And it was just threw me back, and I said, wow, I think that these Anunnaki are walking around with life support bags. I think inside these bags could be potentially, I'm not saying guaranteed that it is, but it could be that they're these are some type of bags that maybe aid them in breathing on this planet. It's the reason why every single time you see them, they have to have this bag. It's not like it's here sometimes, it's not. They have the bag at all times. If they don't have it in their hand, it's on there. It's like etched into the stone on their their body, on their suits or whatever.
They can't breathe in this atmosphere.
I think they can breathe in the atmosphere, but when you first go on a planet that's new, like if we landed on Mars, a lot of people don't realize Mars has oxygen. Mars has a very limited amount of oxygen, but it does have oxygen, it does have barometric pressure, it does have all the conditions and all the gases needed to breathe and inhale. It's just that the atmosphere is so weak, the pressure's so low, anything above probably 8 to 10 feet will be very difficult to breathe in. But breathing from 8 feet and below is probably like being about 17 feet above sea level here on Earth. But the Tibetan monks breathe just fine up there, don't they? They do some incredible things at that level with that limited amount of oxygen. So it's a breathable atmosphere there. Now, if we went there, we'd have to wear a mask and have some kind of oxygen sac or something on us to give us a minute to catch up, acclimate ourselves to that altitude type level of breathing. I've been researching Mars for a very long time. My team is the United Family of Anomaly Hunters, and we've made international news several times already. And we've now downloaded well over 1 million images from NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russian Space Agency, China, and the Indian Space Agency. We've documented over 58,000 anomalies now that are existing in our solar system, and the majority of those 58,000 are on Mars. Anomalies, out-of-place objects, things that shouldn't be there, like things that look like people looking at the camera. Well, according to when you read the tablets, it seems like they didn't have as bright as the sun as we had, because I think they orbit a brown dwarf star. So one of the first things that happened with Alalu when he came out of his capsule, he was like, "Oh my God, it's too bright here," and he put on his goggles. So he put on his goggles right away, so, the sun was really bright here. So I think that they have a lot more dim lighting, because they probably do orbit a brown dwarf star, which we've discovered this brown dwarf star. It's orbiting our sun every 4,200 years. It's now mainstream news.
There's another star that orbits the sun, not just a planet.
Yeah, it's a star. It's a star with planets orbiting. It's got 6 satellites or 6 planets orbiting it. It's now mainstream, history now. It's actually going into history books. We live in a binary solar system. We have 2 suns. We have our yellow, bright sun, and then we have a second sun, which is very far away. It's just outside the orbit of Pluto, but it's there, and it orbits our sun every 4,200 years. In 2-mass infrared mode, you can you go to the constellation of Leo, and you start zooming in. It's amazing. It's aligning with Leo, the Sphinx, and you start to see this brown dwarf out there with planets orbiting it in our solar system. Amazing stuff. So it used to be blacked out on Google. So you would go to the same coordinates on Google Sky, and they had this gigantic big black patch over it, so you couldn't see what was there. Yeah, they only took that patch off about a year ago. So yeah, so through the Freedom of Information Act, we got the black box tapes from Apollo 11 and the black box redacted printed documents as well. So I wanted to do a complete write-up on the moon mission, and did we go to the moon and why and everything else. Because why? Because there's a Sphinx and a pyramid on the moon. And the Sphinx is identical to the one at the Giza Plateau in Egypt. Identical. The dimensions, the shape, the way the wall is built around it and everything else. It's kind of a little dilapidated, but it's there and you can make it out. And there's more than one pyramid on the moon as well. That's what I'm saying. Wow, what is the pyramid doing? So I started researching the moon. Did we really go? Did we not go? And what I came to the conclusion was, yes, we went to the moon, and yes, we lied about it. So we sent up several missions to the moon. We sent up one called the Clementine mission, which went on a low lunar orbit, okay? And when it went around the moon to the backside, it supposedly crashed and didn't come back. But they knew it wasn't going to come back because they named it Clementine. Oh, my darling Clementine, you were lost and gone forever. You know that song? As soon as I saw the name Clementine, I said, okay, what's the catch here? So they sent back almost 30,000 or so images, HD, and I analyzed those images, me and my team, and we came up with a lot of anomalies that will blow your mind. Yeah, Saturn is an amazing place. There's a book by Norman Berggren named The Rings of Saturn, I believe is the name of the book. The Rings of Saturn. It's a book that he did, which, you know, he was the head of Ames Research Institute. This is one of the top aerospace companies, you know, at the time in the world. His resume is so big, it can stretch out this door and down the street. You know, he's a scientist, physicist, everything else. And he wrote the book because he had access to space data images that were showing that the rings of Saturn had structures on them, some of those rings. And he also showed in his images in the book how they were being built, because they actually showed like things like it appeared to be, not that he's saying it was, but it appeared to be, and I gotta admit it, when you read this book, it's amazing, these official images, space images, like construction on the rings. So the first thing with the frequency of Saturn, we have the sound frequencies of every planet in this entire solar system now. And I downloaded all those sound frequencies. I downloaded the one from Saturn and the moon Titan. What's interesting is when you start listening to it, at first it just sounds like a bunch of, you know. But in the one that was coming from Titan and Saturn, you start to seem like it's conversation. So I took it and I sped it up and I said, no. Then I slowed it down. That's when I said, oh my God, this is communication. There's something on that frequency that's actually a communication. So there could be some truth to that. It's actually going to be in my next, in Contact in the Desert. That's one of the videos that's in my slide that I'm showing. The software I use to slow down the audio from Saturn and Titan and let everybody hear what it sounds like. Which is, I think people are going to be blown away because it sounds like people are having a conversation. So, or maybe some type of communication, or maybe they're transmitting information that we pick up and alters our thought waves. So there's so many ways to do that. I mean, technology right now, we can literally alter. I can have every single one in this room hear a sound in their head, and you'll think it's God. All I have to do is transmit a piggyback frequency to your cell phone. And on that frequency, on your cell phone, it'll be, you know, a communication, an actual voice. They've done this before. There's many experiments about this. They can even transmit directly from towers in different neighborhoods and send frequencies out to different areas and make you feel things, hear things, become emotionally distraught. All this technology actually exists and has been tested on animals for quite some time now, probably 30, 40 years, not even anything new. So that's possible. Now with the moon, what's very interesting is the moon appears to be an artificial body. It's a real thing that's up there. Now there's a lot of structures on the moon, because I've now found them myself. How I found them was I decided, you know, forget all these images that could be faked and obfuscated and changed, all these new ones. Let me go to the oldest footage I can get. So I went and got one of the original VHS copies of the lunar module returning back to the command module in space, coming from the lunar surface. There's no Photoshop, there's no CGI back then. This stuff doesn't exist. So now let me pull this video down into my software and let me turn the contrast down, because the surface of the moon is so bright. That's why you can't see stars. People, oh, you can't see stars. Well, you can't see stars. You don't understand photography and videography. You don't understand how light works and reflectiveness works. You're not going to see stars when you have the sun leaving off the surface of something that has that much helium-3. But anyway, so I turned the contrast down, and right away, what do you see? Domes. So many domes, I couldn't even count them all. One of them was the most famous dome structure ever discovered by me. It made TV. It went on. It's actually on Beyond Belief with George Norrie on Gaia as well. It's actually on that show. It made the news a few times. It's a dome structure that has buildings that are about 1 mile high. We don't have that kind of construction technique down here on Earth right now. The amazing thing about it was another one of my team members, Chris Maroney, who runs a YouTube channel called Mars Anomalies. He went to the USGS.gov radar scan of the moon, and he looked at the radar imagery, and that penetrates the surface by about 30 meters. And right away, it's amazing footage. You see structures, what look like gigantic steel beams underneath the moon's surface on official USGS.gov data feed. What in the world is going on? So when you're going back, oh wait, the moon rang like a bell. This moon probably is hollow. Whether they hollowed it out or they built it that way, nobody knows. But there is an account of the Anunnaki going to the moon And that helmet, that time when you see them wearing that fish, or they look like they have that fish, bird head, because sometimes they have a human head, sometimes they have a bird head. The bird head is a helmet. So they say, get the eagle's mask, and they would put on the eagle's mask, which they would say that the atmosphere on Mars, or they would be talking about the moon, is very bad. So they would put on the eagle's mask. So when you see them depicted with having that bird head, that's because they're putting on a helmet. That's their space helmet. And it could be that they're taking, these people were witness every time they were getting in these ships with these bags. It could be that it wasn't for Earth. It could be that those bags were just getting in ships and taking off. But either way, there was even an account in the tablets where one sect or one relative was fighting against the other. And this one group of relatives had done something so horrible that they were banished to go live on the moon. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, to get back to your original question, was the Apollo 11 black box tape. One of the astronauts says that he's looking at a convex dome, a convex crater, and a conical crater. I'm sorry, a conical crater is what he said. Conical. So a conical crater means you're looking at a dome type of a structure. And then Neil goes, "Wow, look down there. I bet the people down there never get out."
Well, there must be nothing more desolate than to be inside some of these wall craters, these conical ones.
People that live in here probably never get out.
Yeah, you're right.
Why would he say something like that? I mean, everything's recorded on there. Even if you sneeze, that's recorded. So he actually said the people on it. Now, Apollo 10 flew around the backside of the moon. And a lot of people don't know that this is really a famous thing that happened back then. Something connected to all their comms. And in the comms, they heard singing and music coming from the backside of the moon. Now, when you go to the backside of the moon, you're completely disconnected from Earth. You have no communication. Houston's cut off. It takes about an hour, I think, to get back into radio range. But while they got to the backside, something connected to their comms on their comm frequency and was playing music. And the tapes, which are available to everybody, oh my God, can you hear that? That's music. What is music doing playing in our comms? Oh my, they just kept saying, they were so blown away that there was music coming in, some type of a weird music, but they identified it as music.
You want some more brownies? Now. First, there's no hunger. That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? You hear that? That whistling sound? Yeah. Woo! Look at your... Yeah, it sounds like, outer space type music.
But yeah, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't that. But it was, they kind of reckoned it to, what do you say? It was like almost like classical. And they mentioned it over a dozen times. So and it was every single astronaut that was in that capsule. So it really did happen. And whatever it was, knew how to tap into their comm frequency, which is pretty amazing. And, so that was pretty crazy stuff. Matter of fact, when the Apollo 11 was going to the moon, which is a three-day flight to get there, Buzz Aldrin, and this is one of the documentaries I did called Docuphobia, he's interviewed and he's saying that there was something flying alongside of them on the way to the moon. And they start having a communication about it, but then they stop themselves because they don't want the mission to get canceled, because they've been waiting your whole life for this one moment. So they stop talking about it in that way, and then they contact Houston and say, Houston, where is the the rocket booster? Because they're trying to see if it's the rocket booster or if they can give Houston a hint that there's something outside our window. And they would say, wow, we see something outside of our window. And then Houston radios back and says, that's been jettisoned and it's already, in the atmosphere, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, so Buzz said we decided not to talk about it anymore because we didn't want them to cancel the mission and send us back home. When they got to the moon, the next thing there's another tape out. Okay, anybody can download this tape. It's official footage. Buzz goes, oh my God, they just landed across the crater and they're watching us. Then Norman Bergman, who's in an interview with Project Camelot, that's the guy at the head of Ames Research, who was sitting there in the top secret room watching the actual landing, live. He's looking at some of the images and stuff like that, and he's noticing that there's 9-foot tall black people getting out of a ship across the crater, just like Buzz said. this backs up Buzz's thing. Now, the lady goes, black people, goes, yeah, black people. Now, he didn't say that it was black like we're Africans. He said they were black, like really black. That was his, he was adamant about it. Now, it could be that they've been wearing a full suit of blackness, or it could have been that they were, I mean, I don't know if you're going to be on the moon with your skin out. I seriously doubt that. But he said black people, 7 to 9 foot tall black people got out of this ship and watched us walk on the moon. And this guy is one of the top scientists in the world. I mean, you know, you have access to walking into the top secret rooms at the space agency, and you're running an aerospace company that creates, airspace, F-18s and all this kind of crazy stuff for the military. And now you're saying that this is what you saw. Why would he do it at this time? I mean, the guy's pretty old and he's getting ready to die soon. And he's like, I just want to tell everybody what I saw. This is real stuff going on. That's amazing. So we went to the moon, but we lied about it. We showed the world a partly fake moon. You know, Hollywood acted out, scripted, because they didn't want you to see what was up there. They really went up there, I think, after they sent some of those satellites before the first moon mission and noticed that there were objects up there that were out of place. They wanted to go up there and get some of that and bring it back with them. Because why? Knowledge is power. If I can get my hands on some ancient advanced technology, they already know about the ancient galactic wars and all this. They know about all the technology laying around. How can we get it? How can we reverse engineer it and make it work for us? That's the real key. That's what it's all about. It's always about power and control. If you control space on this planet, around this earth, you control the earth. This is why America is dominant right now. The whole Iraq war, the Gulf War, all these Afghan wars and everything else, are all fought from space. How? Satellite technology and drones. And because we have the capability of doing that, we have so many more satellites up there that are weaponized. The rest of the world has to, basically bend to our command. We have rods from God up there in space right now. A rod from God. This is a satellite that has 20-foot tungsten steel rods in it that don't have any kind of armory on them at all. But they can be dropped pinpoint directly on any city, anywhere on the planet. And the kinetic energy from the dropping, E equals mc squared, of that tungsten rod will decimate that entire city in seconds with no nuclear fallout. When we all say no, that's when it's over. No rioting in the street, no running down the streets, no begging and hoping and wishing and crying on TV, no wars against them, and we have to stack up our weapons to go against the U.S. Army and all this. No. When 30, 40, 50 million people wake up on a Monday morning tomorrow and say, you know what, we're not going to go to work anymore. You know what, we're not going to buy gas today or tomorrow. We're not going to go to the grocery store. We're not going to get on the bus, public bus. We're going to go to the bank and take all of our money out, for those of us who can even get it, because there's only 15% of the cash available at any time. So that will collapse the entire system in a couple of days. Just that alone. Just that small movement right there. That small movement will collapse the entire system in a couple of days. Then you got to negotiate with us. And we're not going to budge until you meet our demands and we install a new economic system that's based off of unconditional love, that's based off of trade and barter, that's backed by real, gold or real silver or something of value, real commodities. And, and we're going to, the level you get in society is going to be based on how good you are at what you do and how much you can help people and those types of things. A totally different type of a system needs to be installed and put in place on this planet. And until we do that, we're not going to get any help from the outside. We got to start inside first. It's always as above, so below. Just like you need to seek the divine internally, we have to seek help internally. We have to recognize and realize that we are our own saviors. We were sent here to save ourselves. That's the biggest mystery of it all. There's no savior coming out of the clouds to save us from this misery that we're in, that we've allowed to happen. We have allowed this to happen. We put ourselves in this situation by being what? Silent and being in collusion. We've followed the rules and obeyed the laws, and we've allowed all this to happen to us. We walked into it with open eyes and let it persist. Every 4 years, people run down to the little voting box and vote for these presidents that are already pre-selected. Every 4 years. And I've been scratching my head since Jimmy Carter. Since Jimmy Carter, I started scratching my head and going, wait a minute. I knew from back then, this is fake. And I said, looking at people running to the voting booth again, another 4 years. I'm going, wow, they fell for it again. Another 4 years, they fell for it again. And every year I keep scratching my head going, they keep falling for this scam. And I knew this as a kid. When I go to the voting booth, I put my name on the ballot. Then I upload it to my website or social media. Just go on my timeline. Every 4 years I vote for myself. I am my own president. I am the president of my own life and my family. And that's the way I see it. I don't care who's in the office and who's, got their agenda or whatever they're doing. I'm going to live the way I'm living because I know how to bend this matrix. Like I said, I like to mix in sometimes other people's perspectives and talks because obviously he's saying a lot of the same things that I say. And you always kind of see the same trend when you start talking about, these mysteries, these principles, and physics, quantum physics. They always go together because they have to. This is the big mystery. The land of Chem is known as the land of the black people. Okay, that's great. But what also do we get out of Chem? We got the words chemistry and alchemy. Okay, that's where the home of chemistry and alchemy originated, was in the land of Chem. And in chemistry, to have a grasp and concept and idea of how chemistry actually works, you have to understand physics and quantum physics, because you have to understand the subatomic before you can understand how some of these compounds are going to work together, interact together. And I think that before they even got to chemistry in terms of using actual elements, it was the chemistry of the mind, the alchemy of consciousness, that you can then step down and say, okay, how can I apply this thought process, this alchemy, into the real world, and then begin to experiment with chemistry and chemicals and so forth, and building compounds. So it's a real amazing thing. So you're going to see that trend. When you dig into this kind of information about mysteries, you're always going to find that you're going to see people mixing quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and spirituality and principles, hermetic principles together, because they all go hand in hand.